Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Stranger attack in Chinatown.
But we'll be undeterred. I mean, I think that, you can't let something like this be the mark that stops you.
The community resolves to forge ahead after 3 people are stabbed at a busy Chinatown festival. Plus, too much for some, not enough for others.
That's insane. I already pay so much money for rent.
I have a house, but you have to do something for mortgage.
Reaction to BC capping rent hikes at 3.5%. And remembering BC broadcaster Kuljit Kayla.
Truly believe she lived like a beautiful life.
It's when the umbrellas go inside out and you're being dragged by the umbrella versus the other way around.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. It was a terrifying stabbing spree at a busy Chinatown festival that sent 3 people to hospital. And today we learned more about the suspect, 64-year-old Blair Evan Donnelly. He was out on a day pass from a psychiatric hospital. Police say he's now been charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault. And as Michelle Gassoub reports, the incident has left festival organizers and the community shaken.
Yeah, we'd worked very hard to put this festival on, to bring community together.
Organizers of the Light Up Chinatown Festival devastated. What was supposed to be a celebration of culture and community turned to horror. Around 6 p.m. on Sunday, as the festival wrapped, 3 people were stabbed near the event's main stage at Columbia and Kiefer.
It was a senseless crime at this point in the investigation. It defies any logical explanation.
VPD officers arrested the suspect, a 64-year-old man who was out on a day pass from a psychiatric hospital in the Lower Mainland. The victims were a couple in their early 60s from Burnaby and a woman in her early 20s from Vancouver. All 3 were rushed to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Police said it's too early in the investigation to know whether the incident was motivated by hate.
It was so great to see. The community get together, and the community has been just absolutely, it's gone through a rough time over the last few years.
Improving safety in Chinatown was a key foundation of the Sim campaign. His party has set up a satellite office there and increased the number of officers on patrol.
So I think it's time to actually think about how do we prevent stuff like this from happening, rather than just how do we respond to it.
Mark Lee organized several events in the neighborhood over the summer. He says Chinatown needs more holistic support to revitalize the neighborhood.
But I think that we're not really doing ourselves much of a service by kind of repeating the same old mantra every time something bad happens, that we need, more police on the street.
Organizers of the festival say the incident won't discourage them from organizing more events in Chinatown.
We've had so much support from government, from community, people around Vancouver, but we'll be undeterred. I mean, I think that, you can't let something like this be the mark that stops you. And it's a neighborhood that's known for its resilience.
Blair Evan Donnelly has now been charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault. He will remain in custody. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
The province is capping rent increases at 3.5% for the next year. That's well below this year's past average inflation rate of 5.6%. The housing minister says the government is trying to find a balance for landlords and tenants. But as Mira Baines tells us, neither side say it's helping their pocketbooks.
New paint, new flooring.
The cap on rental increases in BC is getting mixed reaction. A maximum increase of 3.5% for rents is too much for renters, but too low for landlords.
I can't believe that. That's insane. I already pay so much money for rent. It's already like half my paycheck. That's just ridiculous.
I have a house, but you have to do something for mortgage.
It does increase my rent, and I think it's becoming more and more unaffordable right now.
The rent increase can be applied beginning on January 1st and is only allowed every 12 months with 3 months' notice to tenants. BC's housing minister says the cap will strike a balance to deal with inflation, which is at 5.6%.
We've announced 3.5%, which we believe is a better balance so that it can ensure that renters can continue to have some level of affordability, but also so that landlords can help cover some of the rising costs that they're facing as well.
Mortgage rates have been on a steady hike, the most in 22 years, putting pressure on property owners. Add the costs of maintaining properties, taxes, and insurance. It's a challenge, says this advocate for landlords.
Everything is going up. And what we're finding is increasingly, and it's not just restricted to the small mom and pop landlords, but the larger landlords as well, is that increasingly you're looking at negative cash flow year over year, and that's just not a sustainable business model.
There has been uncertainty. During the pandemic, rent increases were frozen. Even so, there's an overwhelming demand for places to live with an influx of people moving to BC.
The province says this fall the government plans to introduce more measures to ensure more housing is built in BC. That includes different types and more affordable housing. Already the housing minister has set targets for some cities, although it's unclear how effective that will be. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
The issue of portable classrooms in Surrey has long been a hot political debate, with parties trading barbs over how bad it is and who to blame. But are the accusations true? This week, we're going to dive into the issue of school portables. Our Justin McElroy starts things off with a look at the spin and the facts.
Surrey. It's a city that used to love beavers, now loves saying that it's the future, and has one issue in education that comes up again and again.
It's actually about portables.
That is BC United leader Kevin Falcon. He's made the number of portables in Surrey a big issue, and for good reason. Nobody likes portables. The government promised to make the number of portables go down in Surrey. Instead, the number has gone up. But the opposition has made a very specific claim.
That they would eliminate all portables in Surrey within 4 years. The result of their promise to eliminate portables was they doubled them. We actually reduced them by 100. I can tell them the exact numbers, from 370 to 273 by 2017. But you know, as much as the Premier will try and duck and dodge, the bottom line is he cannot ignore the fact they promised to eliminate portables within 4 years, and they've somehow managed to double the number of portables in Surrey.
So let's do a little bit of a fact check. Now here are the claims that BC United has made. That the NDP made a promise to eliminate portables, that instead they've doubled the number of portables, and that it went down under BC United when they were running the province as the BC Liberals. Let's look at all three. First, did the NDP make a promise to eliminate portables? Kind of.
We have to have a total removal of these portables over the course of the next 4 years.
That was John Horgan, not during the election campaign that got him into power, but in 2016, 9 months before the election. By the election itself, that pledge was nowhere to be found in their platform. Instead, the party just pledged to replace portables, with no timelines or targets. And by the time he became premier, he backed off the promise completely, blaming a Supreme Court ruling that would decrease the number of kids allowed in a class, thereby increasing the total number of classrooms that were totally needed in Surrey.
We had not contemplated when we made the commitment, the Supreme Court ruling, throwing out 16 years of BC Liberal policy. That's going to take us a little bit more time.
So it was a broken promise, but not a campaign promise really, and certainly not a government promise. Next, that the NDP has doubled the number of portables, but that it went down under BC United when they were running the province as the BC Liberals. And this is pretty easy to fact check because we asked the Surrey School District for the total number of portables used in classrooms in the last 30 years. Here is a chart. Now you can see under the NDP, the number of portables has gone up from 284 to 353. Now that's an increase of 25%, not 100. But then again, a 25% increase isn't great given what they promised during the campaign. And what about BC United? Well, they took power right before the 2001-2002 school year when there were 236 portables. And when they were done, was at 247. Now that's not bad at the end of the day, but it's also not a decrease. So to recap, the NDP clearly implied they would reduce portable usage, but they've gone up. And BC United has made bold claims about the issue that don't hold up to scrutiny. Now that's not a conclusion that partisans on either side will like or share on social media, but it does have the virtue of being true.
That was Justin McElroy reporting. The Park Board is deciding on the fate of Jericho Beach Pier tonight. Staff are recommending the removal of the 80-year-old pier. It's been closed for nearly 2 years after major storm damage. They say with climate change and the risk of even more extreme weather, fixing it will be problematic. But as Janella Hamilton reports, not everyone agrees with the proposed demolition.
Just watching people fish or sit out here and read or just hang out, it was a wonderful experience.
Vancouver resident Dave Passon says if the pier at Jericho Beach Park were to be removed, it would be a great loss.
I would hope that Park Board commissioners understand and recognize that the pier is an important part of the city. It's an important part to all the city, not just the people in Point Grey or Spanish Banks area.
Until it was closed in January 2022 after being severely damaged by a storm surge, the pier had served as mooring for marine rescue vessels, a fishing and crabbing spot, and a place for people to enjoy views of downtown Vancouver. In a report, Vancouver Park Board staff are recommending the damaged pier be demolished as it would cost too much to rebuild, and getting rid of it would remove a colonial structure from the Indigenous landscape.
Staff are looking at it from a financial perspective, that the current pier in terms of repair and then ongoing maintenance is more expensive than the option to remove the pier.
Payson thinks a new pier could also meet those reconciliation goals.
I think if it's rebuilt appropriately, it's an opportunity to put reconciliation actually in action. We could have cooperation from our local Indigenous nations to help rebuild it.
While the pier may be set to go, the breakwater will stay as a way of protecting the beachfront at the Jericho Sailing Center.
It's the only logical decision that could be made right now. They don't have $25 million for a new pier that could contend with sea level rise and climate change.
But for Passon, it's a missed opportunity.
And I think this is just a little thing, but it's a way of making Vancouver better. And I mean, can you imagine if this is rebuilt, the gazillions of photographs that'll be taken off this thing?
The Park Board says its budget has already been stretched with repairs to other infrastructure damaged in recent storms. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
An investigation is underway in Kamloops after an unknown substance was dumped into Guerin Creek, turning the water pink. Members of BC's environmental emergency response teams are working with the fire department to identify the substance. The ministry says it believes the discharge entered the creek upstream. Scientists have collected water samples for testing. It says the contaminant doesn't appear to be harmful to humans or wildlife, and as of this afternoon, it appears to be dissipating. A long stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway in southeastern BC is set to close for construction for more than 2 weeks this fall. A section of the highway between Golden and Castle Junction in Alberta will close next week, giving contractors time to work on the latest phase of the Kicking Horse Canyon project, including widening a 2-lane highway to 4 and improving safety conditions. The first closure starts September 18th at noon until September 22nd. A second closure will take place from September 25th to October 6th. Detours will be available via Highways 93 South and 95, but give yourself plenty of extra time, as those detours could add up to an extra hour and a half of travel time. There's been a spike in new COVID-19 cases in BC, but the province's top doctor says it's not unexpected. COVID-19 is starting to follow seasonal patterns like other respiratory illnesses.
It's much, much lower at this point in the year than it was last year. And last year it was lower than it was in 2021. So I think that's really important. It reminds us that COVID has become something, or the SARS-CoV-2 virus is something that is spreading. It will spread at different times of the year in more or less amounts, and we need to be aware of that.
Almost 450 people tested positive for the virus in the week ending September 2nd. That's according to the BC CDC's monthly report. It's more than triple the number of cases from last month's report. Corner stores are often a hallmark of a neighborhood, and in Vancouver, the city wants to know your thoughts on how best to support these small businesses. As Rafferty Baker reports, the city has opened up public consultations.
They're independent shops, sometimes including a cafe, corner stores. The very idea stirs up a bit of nostalgia.
They need to be here. You have to have them. When we were kids,
there was corner stores just about everywhere.
We're lucky here in Strathcona. We have a handful of them, but most neighborhoods don't have any.
But they used to be everywhere. People become regulars and shopkeepers become central figures in the neighborhood.
We have like sandwiches or like sort of stuff too. So that's why, I believe it's pretty important place here for, people who live around here, maybe.
At Wayne Grocery in the Strathcona neighborhood, Sam Sue says 99% of the people that come in are wonderful.
It's good people. Yeah.
I buy stuff that I don't want to have to go down to the big store, travel all the way down to No Frills.
I try to stay away from the big stores because I value these stores. This is a typical corner store family that has worked here probably for 20 years, and we support them.
But they're slowly disappearing from neighborhoods. In Vancouver, officials say there are now 88, but only 40 of those are neighborhood grocery stores. The city is looking for feedback on whether to allow more small neighborhood businesses.
Taxes should be lowered so they can lower their prices.
I would say do whatever you can to make it easier. We had friends running a corner store, and then all of a sudden there was a bunch of zoning trouble that came up, and I think it seemed like the city was trying to put up barriers that were not needed, and the whole community wanted the corner store there.
They're the backbone of the city. This is what built this city, these corner stores. And I don't understand the zoning department, why they're allowing these corner stores just to fade away.
Pop-up engagement events are happening around Vancouver this weekend, and a survey is open until October 10th. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
Premier David Eby toured Kamloops and the Shuswap today, two of the regions hardest hit by this year's wildfires. And during the tour, he announced a new task force focused on developing best practices to respond to wildfires, drought, heat, floods, and many of the other emergencies we've experienced. Our Brady Strachan was there during the Premier's tour today, and he joins me now live from Salmon Arm. So, Brady, what was the Premier's reaction seeing those fire-affected areas?
Well, Premier Eby said that he met with some of the people who were greatly affected by this fire, people who lost everything. And Eby said he talked to people that don't have any insurance. He was short on how he would the province would help, but he said they are looking at ways of helping people that don't have insurance to recover. And the other thing he was here to do was talk about the new task force that the province is setting up for fires, heat, and other disasters. Eby said in regards to fires, they're going to check out what other jurisdictions are doing. They're going to look for local fire experts, what other countries are doing with wildfires. And he says the look will cover many different factors.
Are we incorporating lessons from other jurisdictions? Are we using the best technology? And making sure that we have that strong rural perspective, communities where there isn't an established fire department, where people are in remote areas, making sure that we're including that perspective in all of our fire decisions is going to be very important as well.
And this isn't only going to be for fires, of course. This task force will look at other natural disasters, floods and earthquakes. As Eby says, the province needs to be prepared for more of these occurring.
Yeah, we certainly do, Brady. And, you've been also speaking to people living there. What are residents saying about the government's approach?
Well, I spoke to some people who stayed here and fought the fires. And as we've heard, there was a very contentious situation between the local governments and RCMP who were trying to force evacuation and people that had stayed to fight the fires behind evacuation zone lines. And there's a lot of mending to do of relationships because some people say that they don't trust the government, despite what is being said today, that when they were trying to help each other, local government and the RCMP weren't allowing them in to deliver fuel and goods to people who were staying at home to fight the fires. I spoke to one man who is a garlic farmer. He stayed back and used his firefighting experience as well.
You come back and the locals are actually putting everything out and you shut them down. Come on, explain this. Explain this. If anyone's ever going to be held accountable, I don't know, but it's
We're just going to keep fighting and putting fires out and protecting ourselves and our neighbors. And no government bureaucracy is ever going to change that, I'll tell you that.
All right, it looks like we've just lost our Brady Strachan, who's over in Salmon Arm reporting live for us, talking about the Premier's tour of that fire-affected region tonight. All right, now let's go over to our weather center where Darius Madavi is standing by. So, Darius, how are things looking on the weather front? I see you're talking about the fire danger rating. How are we doing there?
Yes, so we're in a similar spot to where we were at the end of last week. So last Thursday, we were sitting at our highest fire danger was in the north. That's the same story right now. We've seen a pretty dry weekend throughout the interior, but now we're going to get some good rain through the coast, and some of that will make its way further into the province. So it might be a changing story over the next few days, but for now, we've seen that fire danger come up in the south and in the north, the northern interior. So, you know, hopefully this rain that we're about to see will make some difference, but for the places most affected by fire in the northeast and the south, we're seeing that stay fairly dry, but a good amount of rain coming all along the coast, including for Vancouver and the entire island. So potentially a bit of relief for the fire situation that is happening out on the island. Meanwhile, further, we're only seeing that rain come into the central interior, not making its way further south to Kelowna or up into the Fort St. John area, but still a good amount of rain. For us here in Vancouver, that rain is coming tomorrow morning, expected to start around 8 or 9 a.m. and then continue until around 5 p.m. tomorrow. So still a good amount of showers, probably for most of the lower mainland. Expect anywhere from 5 to 10 millimeters before we dry up again for the rest of this week. But we'll talk more about that later this hour.
We will talk some more about that. Thanks for that, Darius.
Thank you.
We have lost a beloved member of our CBC News family. Kaljit Kela was a reporter, weather specialist, radio news anchor, and much more. Kaljit died yesterday after a journey with cancer. The CBC's Dan Burt has more on a pioneering colleague loved by her family, friends, colleagues, and audiences.
It's when the umbrellas go inside out and you're being dragged by the umbrella versus the other way around. So much great food here.
Call us today and let's get started.
Kaljit Kela did everything. Reporter,
Guys, we have some breaking news.
traffic and weather specialist on the ground and in the sky.
She did it her way.
Born and raised in the small town of Mackenzie in north central BC, Kela charged at broadcasting after high school. By the late 90s, she was on air.
The first time I heard her was on the radio while I was driving. It was so exciting to hear her voice. She was so polished already at such a young age.
TV then beckoned.
There are healthy options here at the Peony, and they look delicious.
And she didn't limit herself to community reporting, traffic, or weather.
Did you know having an awesome DJ can make any event so much better?
Kela provided the soundtrack for many a party, and she loved to travel. New York was a favorite. But beyond her on-air work was a job even more important, a loving aunt.
My kids would watch her as we're getting ready to go to school, and it was just a staple for our family just to see her there. It was just such a cool experience. And then come home and just be a regular aunt. And the two worlds never really collided. She made sure they were separate.
Kela also lifted other broadcasters up, quietly and proudly.
As an Indo-Canadian girl from like a small town in northern BC, she was a trailblazer, and we've kept hearing that through the messages that we've got over the last day.
Kela joined the CBC in 2022. She became a fixture on weekend morning radio.
Now back to Cheryl McKay and the final half hour of North by Northwest.
Have you ever heard of zucchini races?
Zucchini races?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay.
I really need to know more now.
And TV weather forecasts.
Kaljit, I love rain. I'm not sure if you know that. Bring me more, please.
There is so much more rain coming. Today was a nice day. It was a calm between two storms.
But her next challenge was immense. She was diagnosed with brain cancer, a journey she shared with others online. She stayed optimistic and itched to come back to work. Kaljit Kela died at Surrey Memorial Hospital on Sunday. She was 46. The tributes have poured in from friends, colleagues, viewers, listeners, and BC's Premier. Her family has read them all.
I truly believe she lived a beautiful life that way, where she did the unconventional, and she had amazing stories when she came back.
And now Dan Burrett joins me now live in studio. So Dan, I wanted to invite you up here to chat a little bit more about our good friend. You know, I think we're all still reeling from the loss of Koljeet. I feel like she was standing up here right behind us.
And in booths, and in
booths,
studios,
yeah, just
everywhere.
weeks ago. And it's just a tremendous loss.
It's interesting to see the outpouring, first of all, as we've seen from across the industry, from across audiences, complete strangers saying, I remember her voice, I remember her broadcast, I loved her easy style. BC Day long weekend, it's Pride Parade. She couldn't join us in the CBC Pride Parade. I mean, it's a huge event. She offered her balcony overlooking the West End as a spot to shoot it. We couldn't get a camera there. She shot it herself. Total servant, great friend, and to her family, thank you for sharing her with us for so long.
Absolutely. And you know, the beauty about Koljeet was who you saw here, was who she was off air. Wonderful, warm, always so kind, and always giving right to the end. And we will miss her so, so dearly. So thank you to her family for sharing her with us for so many years. Nearly 1 in 3 Canadians will develop shingles in their life, but the vaccine to prevent it isn't available to everyone. Medical columnist Dr. Melissa Liem explains why after the break. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. So Beyonce is performing at Rogers Arena tonight. Over the weekend, dozens gathered at Vancouver's waterfront station to perform a themed flash mob in her honor. Take a look.
The little ones all the way to like the whole community, everyone of all ages joining in. It was really fun.
So TransLink approached us. They have a program called Art Moves, which brings artists, musicians, dancers, poets into the SkyTrain system.
TransLink recognized that ridership was low post-pandemic, also recognized that art and culture is something that they want to support and that really helps build community and makes riders feel safe and seen in their system.
You know, once music started and then watching other people dancing, we just grooving around. The elderly, they're not even moving, but their eyes are like...
They're in it.
In it. Yeah. And then like that makes me happy. I'm like, okay, like we are like having like some conversation between the eyes.
In the ultimate present state.
Yeah.
I guess because you're so connected. Like we look at each other and we're like, oh, we're in this thing together.
And seeing them dance in the public, no fear, doing what they love to do, is actually like gave me and gave us like some energy to create, inspired us a lot. I think art can give us, people heal, people can connect together to do things like this so that we can use the tool of art or dance to bring people together and feel the love, and then we can share the love.
Of course, we know the Queen, Beyonce, is coming on Monday, and who doesn't love Beyonce? So we had not yet done a flash mob. This was our most ambitious event to date in transit space, and we think it was a great success.
Welcome back. Shingles is a painful infection that nearly 1 in 3 Canadians develop. It can be prevented or severely minimized by vaccines, but it costs hundreds of dollars. Now, advocates are calling on the province to provide shingles vaccines to BC seniors free of charge. And for more on this, I'm joined by CBC's health columnist, Dr. Melissa Lem. Nice to see you, Dr. Lem.
Likewise, thanks.
So, Dr. Lem, why is it so important for seniors to have easy access to the shingles vaccine? And what are the barriers to preventing people from getting it?
Leanne, what it comes down to is, as you mentioned, shingles is a very common disease and age is the biggest risk factor. 1/3 of people get shingles in their lifetime, and over 2/3 of cases happen in adults over 60, or over 50 rather. And once you're over 60, the risk of severe complications increases significantly. But on the other hand, the shingles vaccine reduces your risk of developing it by more than 90%. So it's a very effective vaccine.
Wow, it's very powerful. And what happens to those who are unable to get the vaccine then?
Well, if you've ever had chickenpox, which you need for the virus to reactivate and cause shingles, as I mentioned, you'll be 90% more likely to get shingles. And the older you are, the higher your risk of severe complications like permanent nerve damage or pain, encephalitis or brain inflammation or blindness. In fact, up to 10% of adults over 65 are hospitalized when they get shingles. But the great thing is that these consequences are almost entirely preventable. There's a huge amount of evidence showing that recommended vaccines, whether they're for shingles, COVID-19, or whooping cough, improve people's health and quality of life, save lives, and save the healthcare system a lot of money. And I realize I didn't answer your question about the barriers preventing people from getting the vaccine. There's actually a lot of research about that. So the biggest barrier to adult vaccination in Canada is, in fact, lack of information about vaccines, followed by lack of access to providers who can give vaccines. And with the shingles vaccine, because it's expensive and it isn't covered, financial cost is also a big barrier. So this is why it's really important to run those public education campaigns, to allow other healthcare providers like pharmacists to deliver them, and to provide them for free, like in some other places in Canada. So Ontario, PEI, and the Yukon all make shingles vaccines available for free to older adults. So unfortunately, BC is lagging behind a bit.
Interesting. So the shingles vaccine is part of the recommended adult vaccine schedule. Do you think, you mentioned a little bit about it. Do you think there's enough education on why that is?
Well, it's tricky because when it comes to staying up to date on vaccines, it's tough to be an adult because we don't have the same regular visits to family doctors or public health that babies do, or those school vaccination campaigns. So it's really easy to fall through the cracks. And then when you think about the fact that the shingles vaccine is recommended for every adult in Canada over 50, even if you're completely healthy, but less than 30% have gotten it, there's clearly a lot more work we need to do around education and access.
Yes, certainly. I remember my family second guessing whether they should get the vaccine. I'm like, no, go get it. It'll help you so much. All right. Thank you for that, Dr. Melissa Lem, our health columnist.
Thanks, Leanne.
All right, over to BC Place now, where Beyonce fans are buzzing in their best silver outfits for tonight's Renaissance World Tour stop. And before Queen Bee herself takes the stage, our Liam Britton hit the streets to take in the excitement and talk to fans. And Liam joins me now from BC Place. And as I can see, he's in his lemonade shirt, not silver, but with the lemonade shirt, showing the true fandom, Liam.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm glad you got the reference. As you say, the Beehive is buzzing today. Let's have a look at a bit of this crowd here. Lots of people filtering in, thousands coming here tonight. Doors opened about 30 minutes ago. Obviously, a very joyful crowd and event today. People snatching up plenty of merch at the table here. Lots of gramming, definitely a lot of gramming going on. And to me, what was also very surprising was just how far people have come to see this Vancouver stop of the Renaissance World Tour. We've met folks from Montreal, Seattle, Chicago, San Antonio, Brazil, New Zealand, France. Some people are seeing Beyonce 2 or 3 times this tour alone. So, it's almost reminded me of like Grateful Dead fans back in the day following an act all around, North America or the world. We got to chat with some of the fans earlier today. Have a listen.
She's, especially with this album, but through her whole career, has been unapologetically herself and making sure that her fans feel loved, feel seen, and feel celebrated. And tonight, we're going to be in a room with tens of thousands of people feeling that way.
couldn't have said it better myself. She's an icon.
Everything that she says she's been through, we go through as well. Even though she doesn't say anything, we could tell she goes through. Even as like a mother, we could tell. And that's why we love her, because she's so real.
Queen Bee. That's right. So we're here. We're super excited. Can't wait. So lucky to even get a ticket. So.
Like she's always one to be who you are, always trying to be making you feel comfortable with yourself. I think that's most incredible about her.
So there you have it. Today, BC stands for Beyonce Carter. For these fans, it's not just about the music, as you heard, it's about her story, her authenticity, what she means to so many people. So capacity 40 to 45,000 here tonight. Obviously, a lot of people getting information for Queen Bee. Leanne?
Yes, information and the amazing fashion. Liam, just like trickling in behind you. It's like a fashion show already. We don't need to go to New York for that. We're just here at Beyonce Carter's place. Perfect, BC place.
Darn right,
Thank you so much for that, Liam. The world is scrambling to help those in Morocco after a quake flattened remote mountain villages. We'll hear from a CBC reporter who's on the ground next.
Dawn at the airport, the calm before the confusion. 114 planes grounded, 34 of those destined for U.S. airports diverted to Vancouver. The RCMP gear up for another day of intense security. 200 officers patrol the airport area. By mid-morning, the confusion, the canceled flights, stranded passengers wait, hoping to get out of Vancouver and get to
Chicago. Tokyo.
Amsterdam is our destination.
Greensboro, North Carolina.
These tourists arriving at Vancouver Airport are typical of what's been happening here all day. People hoping to leave Canada come here to find out that they're not going anywhere. Tour operators scrambled to cope.
Yesterday we had about over 200 people unexpected for one company. So it's probably about 5 or 6 companies was there, so it's over 1,000 people, because it was diverted flights from Los Angeles, San Francisco, other West Coast cities. And all the people came in, they needed somebody to look after them, or some assist need to be provided.
Even though the flights were grounded, airlines were still accepting reservations, hoping the travel ban would be lifted. For most of the day, that didn't happen, leaving travelers in limbo.
Runway 08 right, proceed across runway 12.
Late today, Transport Canada gave the green light for flights to resume, but getting the planes off the ground and back to a normal schedule will be an enormous task. Airport officials say they have a new list of security measures they will have to enforce. They won't say what those measures are, but for the airport, it will be a logistical nightmare. Arrivals and departures will be phased in over the next few days.
There are new and extensive security regulations that have just now been put in place for the airports, the airlines, and agencies that we're working through. And while we appreciate that people want to fly, we appreciate there's a lot of frustration, please don't come to the airport until you have a confirmed flight, because the aircraft will not be determined, the order of departure will not be determined by the number of passengers we have in the terminal, but by a set of criteria from the Ministry of Transport.
One security measure we do know is happening right now is the RCMP search of luggage. The 6,000 passengers who were diverted to Vancouver are having their bags searched. That could take another day.
This is simply a security precaution. I mean, we don't know exactly, what could be on that aircraft. And hopefully there's nothing. And hopefully we're going through this process and we'll find nothing.
The confusion around the airport isn't going to end anytime soon. Never before has there been a catastrophe like this one. Never before has all the commercial air traffic been grounded at the same time. Usually there's 4,000 airplanes in the skies over North America. Airport officials hope that if things go well, the first planes will start taking off from Vancouver tonight. Sudha Krishna, CBC News, Vancouver.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is supposed to be back in Canada tonight after a G20 meeting in India. But he's still in New Delhi because of issues with his plane. And as Evan Dyer reports, Trudeau and his delegation are waiting for the plane to be fixed or another one to arrive.
Well, this has been a very uncomfortable stay in India for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, not only because it's been fraught with tension with the Indian government, including a very uncomfortable meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and lots of criticism from the pro-Modi press and television here in India over the Khalistani or Sikh separatist issue, but also because it's been quite a bit longer than intended because of the breakdown of the Canadian plane CFC-01, which is the Prime Minister's Airbus. That plane had a malfunction when many of the delegation were already at the military part of Delhi Airport preparing to leave. And since then, we have all been stranded here waiting to return to Canada. And in the meantime, the government has been moving various pieces around to try to get the Prime Minister back in time for the Liberal caucus retreat and to finally get out of India. At the same time, of course, the pressure on the Prime Minister being here in India is only mounting because an event has happened in Canada that would have happened after the Prime Minister left India had things gone to plan, but instead is happening with him here. And that is a non-binding referendum held by Sikh separatists in Surrey, BC, which drew out over 130,000 Sikhs to vote in favor of an independent Sikh state carved out of Indian Punjab. Of course, that here is an absolutely radioactive topic. The group that held it, Sikhs for Justice, is a legal group in Canada, but is an illegal group here in India. And there have been images of some of the rallies occurring in BC and some of the voting on Indian television and social media, just inflaming the anger of Indian nationalists and Modi supporters with Canada and its Prime Minister. So yet another reason to get out of India as soon as possible. Evan Dyer, CBC News, New Delhi.
To Morocco now, where a powerful 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit Friday night, leaving at least 2,800 people dead. The quake leveled villages, trapping thousands of people under the rubble. Many rescue operations are still taking place in small communities around the epicenter in the Atlas Mountains, one of which is in the village of Imintala. Chris Brown spoke to residents who have lost everything and those who are still holding out hope.
With time to find survivors rapidly running out, frantic family and friends use their bare hands to dig and remove bricks and crushed concrete. This used to be a mosque in the village of Imintala. The imam, Si El Mokhtar, is still buried underneath. We watched as people called his cell phone and then stopped to listen for any signs of life. There were none. His brother Abdulrahman Farah told us he thought he might have answered his phone early this morning. That intensified the rescue efforts, but now he's not hopeful. It's really hard because people can only use their hands, he said. There is no other equipment to make this go faster.
The damage here in Imintala is the worst that we've seen so far, and this is one of the reasons why. It appears as though the entire side of this mountain was shaken loose when that earthquake struck, falling on homes and crushing people who were asleep in their beds.
Crews from other countries have now joined the search and recovery efforts, but these are extremely difficult places to access. Spain, Britain, and Qatar set up a base camp with dozens of personnel just 14 kilometers away from Imintala, but it still took teams 3 hours to get there. Controversially, Morocco has not yet accepted assistance from many other countries, arguing too many nationalities might add to the confusion. Rescuers say while survivability diminishes rapidly after 72 hours, it's not a hard deadline.
In the Turkey earthquake earlier this year, we made 11 live rescues, including a couple that were 5-6 days post-earthquake.
100 people in Imintala are already known to have been killed, and there are many other bodies to be found. Most survivors have been left with nothing. Jamo lost her mother and 2 grandchildren, and she worries what her family will do now. We ask our people and our king for help, she said. Winter is coming. We need somewhere to take our kids and our family members that are still alive.
Today marks 22 years since the deadly 9/11 attacks. And today at the Peace Arch border crossing, firefighters, police, dignitaries, and members of the public joined together to remember those who died. It was the deadliest terror attack the United States has ever experienced. It began when a plane filled with passengers flew into the World Trade Center in New York. Magda Gebrselassie has more on how Americans are marking 9/11.
Flowers, flags, and bells being rung. That is just some of the sights and the sounds at ceremonies to remember the victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. It was 22 years ago that the plane struck New York's Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and crashed in an open field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. At the main ceremonies, you had family members and dignitaries coming together. President Joe Biden was missing from any of those ceremonies as he made his way back from Asia. But to commemorate the anniversary, he did arrive in Alaska to meet with troops and their families.
I join you on this solemn day to renew our sacred vow. Never forget. Never forget. We never forget.
First Lady Jill Biden was at the National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial, and Vice President Kamala Harris was at the ceremony in New York. And as is done every year, there were moments of silence, and the names of the victims were read out loud.
Kenneth William Busnicki.
Even though it's been 22 years since the attacks, still there are more than 1,000 remains that have yet to be identified. Just recently, through DNA testing, the remains of 2 more people were identified. Now, over the years, there have been other deaths connected to the attacks. There have been 9/11-related illnesses that first responders have been dealing with, and many of them, reportedly hundreds, have died. So the 9/11 attacks, all that was lost, and the lasting impact of that day continue to be felt by so many across the country. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Washington.
Thousands are feared dead in Libya. A powerful storm lashed to the eastern part of the country. Why the infrastructure failed? That's next.
Muneeb Khan arrived in Saskatoon from Pakistan last year under the province's immigrant nominee program. But now, under a new pilot project, his country is not considered a priority country.
I feel it's unjust, unfair, to be honest, because I feel everyone deserves their own chance. They deserve 100%, all of them, regardless of certain country. All of these people, they deserve the chance. If, again, I was not being given a chance, I would not be able to stand here.
The Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program has more than 7,000 spots for newcomers who are assessed on a points-based system for their skills, language, work experience, among other things. But now, a pilot project is restricting about 10% of those spots to people from 8 countries. They include Czechia, Germany, India, Ireland, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, and Ukraine. Khan says it feels like the province wants immigrants that are predominantly European. Experts say this pilot program echoes an old system that was scrapped by the federal government for a more neutral, points-based system.
It just sort of sends the message that these are the places that the province is interested in. And if you're not from those places, maybe you're not the #1 priority of the government.
The province says people from those 8 countries are more likely to get their credentials faster, then start working and stay in Saskatchewan. The province plans to do recruitment sessions in those 8 countries for skilled workers.
We anticipate that a number of the individuals that would be drawn to the program are individuals who are living and working in jurisdictions with pathways for regulatory recognition that would be consistent with Saskatchewan, with occupations in demand.
Roughly 90% of spots in the immigrant nominee program are still open to all countries in the world. But Khan says the change makes it tougher for people like him. Aishwarya Duda, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohit Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Turkey says it is sending desperately needed planes, rescue crews, and aid to eastern Libya after a powerful storm struck the Libyan coast. As Paul Hunter shows us, a torrent of water washed entire neighborhoods out to sea. The estimated death toll now in the thousands.
In the immediate aftermath, once the storm had passed, even amid the rescues, the scope of the disaster was masked by darkness. It was Libyan TV that later showed the true devastation. Entire neighborhoods wiped out by sudden catastrophic flooding. Heavy rains from a weekend Mediterranean storm led to the collapse of 2 dams, sending torrents of water racing toward everything in its path. The death toll in the Libyan city of Derna, said this government spokesperson, exceeds 2,000. 5,000 to 6,000 more, he said, are still missing. The challenge for rescue workers now is simply getting to Derna, a coastal city of 100,000. Roadways in and out remain flooded, stalling convoys of aid. Drone video underlines the vastness of the flooding and that in so many places the water has yet to recede. But it's at street level in urban areas where it's clear this was a full-on horror show. Roadways torn apart, buildings, vehicles, people swept away. Survivors tell stories of waking up to their homes besieged, shouting for help from inside as the rising water raged. Even when the rest of the aid workers get there, they may well wonder where to even begin. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
And Darius has been watching the storm. So, Darius, that storm was in Greece before it was in Libya, and you've got an update from that.
That's exactly right, Lien. So it was in Greece for around 3 days and just absolutely battered, dropped a ton of rain on some of these areas. And we can see here, this image was released by Copernicus, the EU's climate change service, yesterday. And you can see these areas that have just been completely flooded. What was once just land after a river overflowed has just been absolutely swamped. So a really massive storm, and we're still getting the impact. So I'm sure we'll have more imagery of Libya tomorrow, but it's been a really nasty storm that's just been making its way through that entire area. Meanwhile, we have another storm that's here in the Atlantic. Hurricane Lee is making its way up the coast. It's expected to turn northward. We can see right now it's been tracking to the west, but it's expected to turn up and move up the U.S. East Coast over the next 5 days or so. And so we've seen it keep tracking west, but now it does seem that it's going to avoid Florida, which is good considering it's just been hit. They've just been hit with Idalia, and so avoiding some more impacts, but they're already seeing some dangerous rip conditions and wave conditions, but potentially making its way up to the Maritimes. It's still too early to say, but we're going to be keeping on it because this is around the time when we saw Fiona hit just last year. And so we are seeing it weakening as it moves up the coast, but just something to keep an eye on over the next few days. If we turn our gaze over here to BC, we also have some rain, not hurricane level by any means, but over the next, we talked about this, moving into the coast, seeing a good amount of rainfall, including on the island. It's not until tomorrow morning that we see that make its way into Vancouver, but it's just a really brief impulse. I just missed it there as I was trying to gesture. And then we dry up across the province for the next few days as well. So just one brief spurt of rain, but it should be a fairly good downfall. We're talking up to 10 millimeters in some parts of the lower mainland, and parts of the island will be getting a lot more than that as well. So some good conditions there. It is also bringing some outflow conditions, so expect a bit of a smokier day for much of the island and lower mainland tomorrow, but as usual, much worse further north. And then as we get into, zooming in, you can see the island. And then as we get into tomorrow, temperatures do come down somewhat as we see that rain. Now, it does show a lot of rain over here, even in the interior, but this is just going to be a couple scattered showers, nothing too much. It's really the coast that sees all that rain. And for us here in Vancouver, that is our 1 day of rain before we clear up once again for quite a dry and sunny stretch.
A nice mild week ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
The Canucks have named a new captain. We'll tell you who's the 15th captain of the Vancouver Canucks after the break. The Vancouver Canucks have named a new captain.
I'm never going to be the loudest guy in the room. I'm going to be a guy that hopefully can be a leader through his work ethic and, you know, in the games. And as time goes on, I'll learn more and more about myself and being a leader. And I feel real confident walking into this because of the coaching staff and the management I have with me and the people behind me.
That's Quinn Hughes, now the 15th captain in the team's history. He's also the first defenseman named as a full-time captain since Kevin McCarthy wore the C from 1979 to 82. Hughes served as an assistant captain for the first time during the 2022-23 season, and when the 23-year-old scored 7 goals and 69 assists in 78 games. Those sound pretty impressive. All right, congrats to Quinn Hughes. That's it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us at CBC News at 6. A reminder to check us out on CBC Gem, our free app. That's it for us tonight. Anita will be back tomorrow. Have a good night.